Lady K Fever is here with us on Boone Avenue on this beautiful summer morning. And she's been very much involved with this beautiful wall that's slated for demolition. Tell us about your what's going on here, what's your experience with this neighborhood, and how did we come to be here today?
So the first time that I got called to come, it was for Meetings of Style, I think in 2007 or 2008, but it was on the other side, so I came and there was hundreds of writers. And then I got to paint the wall across the street. So once a year I come down to this neighborhood, once or twice, and I'm invited. This time, this is Cope's wall, and so Cope has invited me to come paint it. I never know what to expect. I get the phone call the day before. I don't know who is painting, and it ends up, so when we come, it becomes this whole idea of making it kind of work with everybody else on this wall.
So you're able to envision how the different artists will fit together and then just, sort of spontaneously work it out, or?
Yeah, no, because with, I don't know, with Cope, I guess he likes spontaneity. Sometimes he definitely does make plans, but I think he envisions when we come, he doesn't necessarily always know where we're going to go, but he kind of curates where we fit in. So when I came, we looked all over the wall, and he was like up here, and I'm very thankful that he put me with CERN, who was a big part. Like, this wall came from, originally the Meetings of Style was in Brooklyn, and it was brought to the Bronx, which really made this neighborhood, I guess, with street art come up.
So how long ago was it?
This was like, my Meetings of Style started in 2004 in New York, and then 2007, 2008, it happened here, and then Cope's just kept it alive by having people come and paint. Okay, so what we have here, so this is the beginning of the wall, which is very important. Both sides are always the good, the beginning and ending, but Robots Will Kill. They're a crew from, I think, New Jersey and Brooklyn. There's a bunch of guys, and they were instrumental in getting this wall with Cope in the beginning for Meetings of Style. So they were actually the first people that called me in 2007 and said, come paint, and then it went on from there.
So would this be something that they did at that time, or did they come back and redo it?
No, they've done it after. So this whole wall is being redone this year.
Okay, everything's been redone.
So they have this.
So it's kind of a social thing too, because
It
then
is.
you're having reunions.
It's totally social. We spend a lot of times looking at a wall, but what's so much fun about painting a wall is who you get to hang out with.
Yeah.
So when I was painting, I couldn't believe it. It's one of my favorite writers of all time, Scheme. He was originally in the documentary Style Wars, and he really was a king of the subway lines. He was amazing, and he's still painting. So this is his style, and it was really just amazing to meet him and know that a lot of times these guys are still around, but they don't do pieces, and they're not doing big walls, but he's still painting and doing his thing. This is what other kids look to do this specific style. Then we have Cope, which is fun. It's always fun to paint gates. And then Indy, she is originally from Washington Heights, so Indy 184, and she works with Cope a lot.
This is giving me an opportunity to take the time to look at in a different way at what we're seeing. I wish the Bronx Tourism Council would,
I know. There's a tourism
offer this, insight into the art, that's our, legacy, our strength.
Good. No, so then we have the other thing that a lot of people travel the world. Like, a lot of guys, these guys didn't travel the world, but people travel to different boroughs to paint. So we have Ski, and then we have 2SA, which are two guys. They used to sell their work in Soho on canvases, and then they've gotten themselves, they're doing a lot of shows down in Chelsea, and also starting to get famous, but mainly from Brooklyn. They're a Brooklyn crew.
Which is theirs?
So we have Ski up here, and then what's so crazy about this one is that they have these ladders now that compact, so they fold down and fold up, and so these guys showed up with these. I was struggling with this ladder that I had to carry around, but they had these ladders, so they were able to get up big. So 2SA, a lot of guys really like him. He was a bomber. Same with Ski. A lot of these guys like Cope start bombing, and then they always did art, but then they start to sell their work in galleries. So 2SA and Ski are another guys that I guess are hot on the rise as far as artists.
Amazing.
So, and then we have Cope, which, you know.
So he's somebody who's been around for a while.
So what a lot of people don't realize, I guess some people do know, but a lot of people don't realize what Cope is known for is just his bombing stuff, but he really is an amazing piecer. I mean, the amount of details, when you're up close with it, there's a lot going on, but you take this away, it just pops right off the wall, and that's what he's known, that style. And that's definitely a Bronx, his work for me just is so much about the 1980s and the Bronx and all that energy and tension that was going on in this city.
He's like an expressionist almost.
He's an expressionist, but what he's mostly, what he gets known for is his stuff that's very simple and his bombing.
Cool.
So, and then coming up to this section, what's really great too is that the energy changes as we go down the wall. It's almost like a history with like looking at even just the style of lettering. So then we get into, I think it's Sien. It's S-I-E-N. As you can see, he's got a stencil on here, and then he writes IDE sometimes. So his style, he's part of the X-Men who have this amazing, they were part of they work in the Bronx as well, so there's they're a crew that really pushed forward this kind of style that was happening that's very flowy, and it lifts off the page and it floats. It's kind of floating, and I really love his style.
So this top thing is
something different.
Something different.
Yes.
Okay, so there's like, so who determines, I mean, is it determined how much space you're gonna get when you come here? Okay.
Well, I mean, basically, you're kind of wherever you can fit in and figure it out. Yeah. So then we have coming up, I've heard about him, I'm not sure.
Okay.
Yeah. I think he's from Europe or something, but I could be totally wrong. And then, so what we have here, the YMI crew, and this is CERN. So when CERN and I were in 2004, we were put together through Backspin Magazine, who I used to write for, to put together Meetings with Style, New York edition. So it's really great that I got to paint with him again on a wall, and kind of like, you know, it's kind of sweet in the sense that we didn't know the wall was coming down, but the fact that the wall is coming down, it's a nice note to leave it with Cope and with CERN, because they were instrumental in making Meetings to Style happen back then and also at this wall. So CERN's known for these characters and doing this piece, commentary. He does a lot of work, me and CERN, and he do like talking about nature, the city, your experience through nature and the city, and how you kind of put those two worlds together. With Martha Alicia, we have this dog, and we have a worker, and we have a child, and we have fish. We have all this idea, like what I really love with Martha Alicia's work is really hopeful. And so I feel the same way, is that we have this amazing compassion and sensitivity towards what we idealistically would love to see. And just her, I love the mood of her palette. So when I was looking at it, you know, I'm looking at the fact that she's using yellows and oranges. It's like, what can I complement? When I show up, I just bring whatever paint I have, or whatever, we say full cans, whatever full cans or whatever. So I just looked at the palettes that these two were working with, and then I was thinking, especially with CERN, because it seems like it's very much talking about this, a darker city, and I really want to bring this idea of the stars and the heavens, and
I love the way he opens
energy.
This little window into the, you know, the blue sky thing. It's really how it's interesting. He's painting on bricks.
Yes.
He's painting bricks on bricks, which is really cool.
And then I felt like this was kind of like sometimes what I like to take is the negative into the positive. So this is like the toxic smoke and spew from the city, and then it becomes effervescent and then becomes something positive. So it's like I work more abstract, but it's about emotion and those kind of things. So I was just trying to take the emotion of what I saw, and because they weren't here the day that I was painting. So when I came, I was like, what can I add to it that kind of, you know, makes it a 360 kind of experience and narrative. And then with this girl as well, which I thought was really cool.
Okay, and now how do you feel about what's going to be happening here?
I'm saddened by the fact that it's a beautiful wall, and what was really great that it's a beautiful experience, because ultimately doing graffiti walls and doing street art is about the experience in the neighborhood or the experience with the other artists. So I'm disappointed that I won't be coming down here, but there's definitely other walls. It would be great. I know that there's some preservation happening with the wall, but it would be great if there was a way to, you know, actually take this physical wall opposed to it coming down and moving the wall somewhere. No, I think with that is that I think what's happening with, you know, you having this on your show and other people documenting it and talking about it who are not in the graffiti world or the street art world, I think it really brings unfortunately it's going to have to come from the outside to make it realize how important, how, you know, if this was just a blank wall, if this wall over here was just a blank wall, who really wants to walk down this neighborhood? It's not exactly friendly when there's not art on the wall. Art means that there's some sort of love in the neighborhood.
And in the time that I was just, you know, several days that I was here painting, I mean, there were people having, you know, family gatherings in front of the wall with, you know, just people coming in vans and just jumping out and having their picture taken in front of the wall. It's a destination. It's become a destination in that way.
These areas that are kind of abandoned and industrial, and you're talking about that, they allow artists. A lot of times as an artist, I get hired to do jobs, but I'm forced to do something. I mean, of course I love it, but I have to do something possibly that's for a certain audience, for a certain neighborhood that really talks about their issues. But, you know, I get to come here on this wall and I get to play. Like normally when I get walls like this, I get to play, I get to have fun, I get to experiment, and I get to push my craft further. And so that's what's really great about buildings like here and in neighborhoods that are more industrial, that as artists we really get to express ourselves freely. You know, and that's really a beautiful thing, because that's something that's disappearing, I feel like, in New York. I feel like other cities in Europe and Miami, they all support artists to be free and to experiment and kind of take the craft to a whole nother level. And so that's also with the Bronx, the history of having these dark areas, these neighborhoods, they allow kids to really be creative and really take another art form and blow it up around the world like hip hop did.
You know, you know, that I know so little you know, about that whole perspective that you've shared with us, so I really appreciate
You know, this one
that.
thing is, like, if you go anywhere in the world and you say you're from the Bronx, there's a certain level of respect, and I think that's amazing. People really respect that, especially in hip hop culture. That, you know, it's like you are someone who's you're living hip hop every day. Whether it's you define yourself as a hip hop person or not, being in the Bronx, it's hip hop, and it's a really beautiful thing. You're hip hop, Daniel, going out and doing your stuff on the streets and stuff like that.
Cool.
You're in touch with the culture that's happening that influences the world.
All right,
So-
well, thank you for the compliment.
Yeah.
Well, I'm so glad that you're able to join us today and that we got here before this, you know, just becomes a memory. And look forward to meeting up with you when you're, you know, working on your next wall.
Okay, good. Well, thank you for having me,
All right.
Daniel. It's always a pleasure.
Thanks a lot. So Valerie Larco is here with this beautiful day on Boone Avenue, and Valerie, you've spent quite a bit of time right on this very street. So tell me about what brought you here and what the experience has been.
Well, I started painting here, I guess it was in February of 2012. I actually started on the other street, right on the other side of this building, on West Farms Road. And I was just doing a little painting, and when I was standing out there, I met this man named Guillermo Gonzalez. And he was smoking a cigar, and he comes over to me and he goes, "What are you doing?" And I go, "I'm painting." Everybody always wants to know what you're doing. And then he goes, "Well, I'm the president of Ferris Stahlmeyer. That's the meatpacking plant building that is covered from head to toe in graffiti." And he said, "Well, I'm moving my company. I'm getting pushed out of the Bronx. They don't want manufacturing in this area anymore. And I'm going to move my business to Florida." But he said, and that was like 2 years ago, he goes, "Well, for over 10 years, I have been encouraging the graffiti artists to use my building as their canvas." And so he would get them permits, he would have them tell him what he was going to do. So in a lot of ways, this gorgeous building on Boone Street is his brainchild. He was the one who had the vision. I actually think of him as a visionary. He wasn't just a businessman, you know, selling hot dogs and sandwich meats. He thought that his building would be even more interesting if the local artists used it to express their creativity.
So you were just here because you wanted you didn't know the graffiti artist at that time?
Nope, I didn't know anything. What attracted me originally to the building was just that it was pink. If you go to the other side of the building, it's all pink. The graffiti hasn't totally covered the pink building. And I'm like, I could see it from another site where I was painting, you know, just a couple of blocks away, and I'm like, I should go check out that pink building. That looks cool. So I came over to the pink building, and then when I got closer, I'm like, this really is a cool building. So like I said, I set up with my first small, it was only a 16 by 20 inch canvas, and I started hanging out. I met Guillermo, and when he said the building's gonna be knocked down to put in housing and stuff, I said, oh, that's gonna be a real shame. I should really try and capture some of this
So he
amazing
knew
building.
that
Yes,
at
he
the
knew that
very
point.
couple of years ago?
Yeah, by that point the developers had already purchased the building, and when I met him, he was in the process of moving his
So
company out.
do you think that the graffiti artists have been aware of that all this
You know what?
time?
It's funny. I don't think they did know because because I'm out on the street for so many hours. I mean, I'm back here day after day. I've spent more time on Boone Avenue and West Farms Avenue probably than any of the graffiti artists because it takes me so long to do a painting. Painting takes me anywhere from, 3-4 weeks up to 2-3 months. So I've been here a lot over the course of that time. So I get a lot more information. I met the president who first started the graffiti on the building. I met the developer who has since purchased the building and is going to turn it into housing.
He's not, open to a conversation about...
Actually, his name is Robert Frost, and I actually think he really likes the art. He is definitely not anti-art, but his project has
doesn't necessarily incorporate...
But I think we might need to have a conversation with him and maybe encourage that there should be a wall. In a perfect world, after the housing and the neighborhood is all changed, it would be really nice if there was a wall like this still in existence, somewhere incorporated into the new development. Because the other side of this, besides the graffiti artists, I call the building a living museum of graffiti artists because it's always changing, it's always evolving. Besides that is all the people who come to the wall. This building attracts people from all over the world. I've met artists from Japan, I've met tourists from France, I've met photographers, and they all use this building. I've met musicians, fashion shoots, models. Everybody uses this building as a backdrop for their creativity. So it would be nice, as I said, in a perfect world, if some piece of this could still exist. This is one of the most fascinating places I have ever painted. And that's because of the musicians. That's because of the people who film their art form in front of the building. There is never a dull moment in this neighborhood. And that's the kind of the important thing or the creative thing that's going to be lost when the building is knocked down next week.
And I imagine, because I'm also a person who works out on the street, that the energy that you're talking about, the others being inspired by this, scene, permeates your vibe, your feeling, and the work that you create in response to it.
I think my work is probably much better because I do work on location and I do feed off the energy in the neighborhood, and I can always see new things. I mean, happy accidents happen, something might change, something might develop, and I can incorporate that. It's a much more enjoyable and fun experience for me to be out on the street. I think that it would just be boring if I took a photograph and went back into the studio. The other important aspect of what I do is I like to know the history. I'm a bit of a urban, archaeologist. I want to know about the history. I want to know about the people in the neighborhood. I want to find out more about the place. And I think all that information, all that energy, as you put it, ultimately makes my paintings better. And like I said, I didn't know that I'd be spending 2.5 years here, but it's been such a fascinating place that I just kept returning. Even this year I said, I'm not doing anything there. And then I came and I'm like, oh my God, there's all new murals. Well, maybe I could just do a few small ones before they knock the building down. This building is addictive. Yeah,
well, I had no idea when I asked you a couple of months ago if I could come, paint with you out someplace, that place would be, you know, so loaded with such a rich story and
A rich history.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
the history of this building is really fascinating too. Not only have I met the president of the current president of Ferris Stollmeyer, I also talked to the daughter of the president who was president of the building in the 1960s. Then was Eli Hockman, and his daughter Marilyn told me that her father is the one who painted the building pink, and then his son Guillermo became president after him, and he's the one who encouraged the graffiti. But the pink building was such a natural backdrop. And she said the reason her father painted it pink was he was actually a Holocaust survivor. There's a fascinating history to this building and to the people who made this building ultimately what it was. And when he came here and he bought the business and he started trying to make a real go of it. Pink was the cheapest paint when he went to the hardware store, and they had a lot of it.
And,
it was on sale, so he bought it. He painted the entire building. You know, there's a building that shouts at you. It does not whisper. It draws you in. First you see the big colorful building, and then you get drawn into all the art that's on top of that beautiful pink backdrop.
Cool.
It is really cool.
All right. Well, thanks for sharing, you know, that, you know, history. We have such rich stories here in the Bronx. So Valerie, you know, as we're talking, the sun is starting to cook us here, and I know that you work in all weather.
All kinds of weather. You too. I tell you, outdoor landscape painters are a hardy lot.
We
You got to be
certainly
to put
are.
up with all the elements, including this rather brilliant sunshine today here.
Valerie!
Beatrice! How are you?
How are you?
Good.
So, some gelato for
Wow.
Whoa!
made with Italian extra virgin olive oil.
Oh
from
my!
Sicily.
This
Oh,
is
how- oh, I
Sicily.
like it.
We thought you
This
just
is Aida.
Aida.
She's
Hi,
helping
sweetie.
us.
Sicily.
Great.
We thought you descended from the heavens.
Yes,
There we go.
Help me, help me.
All right. Oh, God, this looks so good.
Wow!
Thank
What a
you.
Some more.
Amazing
Oh,
timing.
I won't say no.
Yes.
Okay.
Wow.
Did you make this, Beatrice?
A friend of ours, a pastry chef from Manhattan, made this with
Oh,
our extra
thank
virgin
you.
olive oil, which is called Piano Grillo.
And you have a
And we
business
have a
here in the
warehouse.
neighborhood.
We import Italian food.
And the name of it
is
is?
Gustiamo Inc. We have a website called gustiamo.com.
Okay.
And we are right across the street.
So, and you've been
at
here
the
for
corner.
a while, or?
We've been here 14 years.
14
We've
years.
seen all these murals going up. We know Valerie well.
You know, clearly a lot of love and skill and art went into the making of this gelato. So
This is centuries-old traditions to make gelato. Started from the Sicilians, or before them the Arabs. And the pastry chef who made this used our best extra virgin olive oil. We import Italian food,
So
extra virgin olive oil, pasta, tomatoes. We have a warehouse here in the Bronx. We've been in the Bronx 14 years. And it's right one block off here. And
So Gustiamo is a name, family name,
no,
or?
gustiamo in Italian means let's taste together.
Oh,
It's
perfect.
Like, it's a learning experience.
Let's eat
all
together. Let's
together.
share. This
And
is
let's
fab.
share.
Oh, you're going to share more with me. God, I
How
won't
is it?
say
How
no.
is
It's amazing. This is a very special
We have
treat.
a website and we sell gustiamo.com, and we sell to chefs and stores here in Manhattan, Brooklyn, and around the country.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Beatrice.
Thanks for
This is-
stopping by. Beatrice is amazing.
So, you know, any of you other wonderful food producers, whenever you see us artists out in the street, you know,
us.
don't be
Feed us.
shy. Feed us.
Yes, we love
need
samples.
sustenance.
We
Thank
love
you.
samples.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Grazie molto.
So Valerie, thank you for bringing these paintings that clearly were done here in the neighborhood. You want to tell us a little bit about these?
Sure. This is the largest painting I've ever painted on location. And when I started it, I started the right side, which is the loading dock, which is right down the street here. I started with the loading dock. Before I painted the building with graffiti, I've always been interested in industrial sites. I did a whole series of chemical tank and other kind of tank paintings. So I really love this tank there, and then the loading dock. It sort of had it all. And even before the graffiti, I was very interested in commercial signage. So I love the Ferris Stollmeyer Meatpacking Corp sign. So this painting sort of incorporated all of my loves, industrial, signage, and then the new love of graffiti. So it had it all, and I started there. And as I was starting to finish the painting, I'm like, what am I going to paint next? And I kept looking at the building right next to the loading dock, and I'm like, that is such a cool building. And I'm a big fan of the King Bee, the Royal King Bee, the graffiti artist. I love his work. And he had several pieces along with the Shepard Fairey. And Shiro's in there, the graffiti artist, the woman from Japan is in there. So there were all these cool people, and I'm like, why don't I do the other one too? Now I'm like, well, if I'm gonna do the other one, why don't I just make them match up? So hence this diptych was born, the largest painting I've ever done on location. Something like this would never have happened in the studio from a photograph. It wouldn't even occur to me. But standing here for months, I mean, I worked on this diptych on over a 5-month period. I started and it was summer. I ended, it was late December. I finished this painting right after Christmas of 2012.
So did you paint it entirely on location?
Yes, I did. There was a little bit of adjusting of values. There's a little bit of fine tuning with, I do a little bit of color in transition areas, but almost all of it was done on location.
Cool, and having that sweep is a whole different experience. I'm a big fan of that. I've had pieces that have grown to 20 feet, and somehow, because I feel like it really captures, like, when you're in a location, you're influenced even by stuff that you don't see, that's off to the sides, and you can't compact that into one little canvas. So let's move on to this next one. So what's the relation of this piece to this piece?
Well, you're looking at them and you don't even realize they're the same building. But this is the first large painting I did in early summer 2012. It's on the other side of the building. Here you can really see the pink color I was talking about, that the Eli Hockman, the president in the 1960s and 70s, he's the one who painted the building pink. And I really loved this pink building. I loved all the different colorful graffiti. I love the traffic sign. You got some cars. It sort of is the whole building in one painting. But you walk around, that's on West Farms Road, you walk around onto Boone Street, and it's a whole nother world.
Yeah.
And that's sort of the beauty of the graffiti and this building, and also the beauty of painting on location. You can just turn your head and there's a whole nother world you can capture.
And so I was so glad when we had this conversation a couple of months ago, and I asked if I could come paint in wherever you're setting up, and so it opened up my world to what's happening in this location. And of course, I found what was interesting was a painter on the street of the Bronx. This is, I've painted a lot of subjects over the years, but I never had the opportunity to paint another painter on the street because, as you know, there aren't, we're a rare breed.
We are a rare breed. You got me painting the painting with Lady K Fever in it, so that's kind of a painting within a painting
circle,
within a painting.
And I really I want to dispel the notion of these competitive artists who are just like all vying for the same bit of limelight or something. That's really a bunch of nonsense. It's so much more fulfilling to collaborate and to interact and to get inspiration from your fellow artists. So
oh yeah, it was fun to have you out here. I got to share my world with you.
Yeah.
When you asked me if you could join me, I'm like, sure. I said, you have to come where I'm painting because my building's going to be demolished, so I'm on a clock. But as long as you're willing to come to my world, I'm happy to have you.
Cool. All right.
It was fun. It was a fun experience.
It really was. Welcome to Art and About with Danny Halbin on BronxNet, taking place today on Boone Avenue, 173rd Street in the Bronx. A very unique location. So I'm going to jump into this painting, and which will include perspective, looking down the street always want to think when you're composing your painting, foreground, background, large, small, the balance of opposites. So what am I doing? I'm making a compositional outline. I'm blocking out the key shapes. So I'm looking up, I see foreground, big wall, beautiful graffiti. I want to leave enough space, so I'm just going to draw my lines light, meaning only making it dark enough so that you can see your lines, because they're going to change. And you want to be able to change everything without making a big mess. So I'm blocking out my big shapes first. And that will determine, it will give me the ability to determine where, everything fits on my canvas. I want to have enough room for this big-headed girl in the foreground. I want to have room for my background, for the road in between, the building across the street. And so I'm using a little bit of brown paint with a lot of my oil painting medium, a lot of oil. If you were working in a water-based paint like acrylic, you'd be using a lot of water with your acrylics. But in my case, it's oil all the way. So I'm going to block out my shapes. And remember, you're never stuck with the shapes that you're making, with the lines you're putting in, because you're working loose and light. You don't like it, take your rag, you could rub it right out. And if you can envision the scene that you're painting as 4 big shapes or 5 big shapes, however many shapes that can be reduced, so that without investing a lot of time and effort and without giving in to the urge that we all have to use a lot of detail and jump right to the detail, if you can just discipline yourself to block out the shapes right off the bat, right at the beginning of the process, so that you can see how they fit together. You have to create the foundation, the pieces to this puzzle. And now, once you feel confident about these shapes, you can bring in the next layer of detail. So we have blocked out the basic foundation, the basic shapes of this painting. The next step is to fill them in with color. And I'm going to start with the sky. So, I prepare my paints ahead of time in the studio, and I mix a variety of colors. But of course, when you get out on location, you see the colors that you're trying to match in the world, and so you may, find yourself having to remix some colors and find the right shades and values. And so I think this is a good sky color. Always keep your rag handy for drips or smudges or whatever. Oil paint, as I have mentioned before, is a very forgiving medium. You can change it at any point. You're never stuck with what you have. So you will notice that I'm using a larger brush for blocking out the colors. So I can cover large areas. And I don't even want to get into the clouds or the nuance, the fact that the sky always gets lighter at the horizon. We'll wait on that. So every section that I've blocked out with my compositional outline creates a shape. And now you can see the shape that I've created for the sky. And that gives me a reference for the rest of the painting. So next, I think I will save my my blue sky brush, and I think I'm going to block out the road. So I just want to make sure I'm going to re-examine my composition. Maybe I want to show a little bit of the turn in 170th Street to show like more of a cross shape that the street is making, and the street is it's a gray. It's a lighter color as well. So I'll try to mix that. You always want to prepare a lot of white. You want to have a lot of white available for you because that's the color we use the most in painting. And as you see, in a few moments, I can get a sense of the landscape, of how this space, how we are able to, transfer the three-dimensional world onto a two-dimensional surface. And I'll mention the word perspective again, in that everything gets smaller as it goes further away. Everything that's below eye level goes up to the horizon. Everything that's above eye level goes down to the horizon. So if there's a rooftop that's heading away from you, it's going to go down. If it's above you, it's got to go down. If the point where the building meets the sidewalk is below you, because your feet are, if your feet had eyes, that would be eye level, but your feet don't, in most cases, your feet don't have eyes. So my eyes, your feet are below, so this angle has to go up to the horizon. So just, there are a lot of details in this building, but what I don't want to get involved with them, but I want to see maybe this area in the distance is a lighter color, foreground is a darker color. So I'm just going to now that I have more or less blocked out my sky, my street, I'm going to block out my buildings. And I'm going to, I always, when I'm painting in the Bronx, I always bring lots of grays, browns, beiges. Those are the building colors. So I have a bunch of those mixed up. And I know in general that this side of the street at this moment is in the shade. And I'm going to try to be conscious of that. You always want to be aware when you're a painter. The one thing you want to say to yourself right away is, where's my light source? Which angle is the light coming from? Which angle are the shadows being cast? So at this point, if I'm going to make this more of a morning, midday painting, I'm aware that that's going to change. But if I decide that this is the way I want it to be, then I'm going to darken this face of the buildings. And even though this side has graffiti, I'm going to just slightly darken it so I can see my size and shape relationships to each other. Okay, now we have shadow and sidewalk to work on. Now the sidewalk is lighter and yellower than the road itself. So I'm going to mix a couple of my lighter colors. Try not to try to keep them as clean as possible. It's a warm, kind of an orangey tone to the sidewalk. I think I mixed too much of a greenish cast, so I need to balance that with more red. Everything becomes a pattern, and everything, you have to think of the total scene, the total story, not pieces. You don't want to, get fixated on one area, and then when you start to put other things, you realize later in the process, after you've invested all kinds of time and energy, then you realize, oh, I really should have made that smaller, or I really should have made that, less obvious, or I should have positioned it further over to the side. You don't want to have to get to that point where then you have to take your rag, undo all this work that you invested. You really want to be able to get quickly and efficiently to a sense of these relationships. You want to see the world in terms of shapes and colors and relationships. It's a different way of viewing the world. So again, if in dealing with perspective, if you're looking at an angle, if anything above you is going to go down to the horizon, everything below you is going to go up, and they're going to meet. In this case, I'm dealing with 1 point, it's called 1 point perspective. All of these angles are going to meet somewhere in the distance. That's what's called the vanishing point. And at that vanishing point, you can calculate where all your angles go. So if you had a window here, it would be along that line. Here's your angle for your street. And if you curve it around like this, here you can see that angle. You can see this angle. Okay, so I'm continuing to block out my shapes. So that I see that that the top of this building was newly painted white, and we know that it's heading that way, so it's going to be getting. Oh, I've got to make sure I blend and mix my colors correctly, and I'm just going to tilt it down a little because it's above eye level. That's going to a different vanishing point that's heading in that direction. Don't get frustrated if you feel confused. I teach architecture students, graduate students, adults, kids. Perspective is a challenging concept, but it's something that it's important that you work with in your art because it just makes life that much easier once you get it. So just to jump ahead a little bit, you know, now that we have a sense of the lay of the land, I'm going to just block out a couple of these details of the graffiti. And I also am aware, so this is the top of the building, heading down towards the horizon, the far edge of the building. And I just want to kind of block out some of these details. Sometimes in order to see the shapes we're creating, you can work around them with a negative space, the negative space. The negative space is the space, so it's not the head of the dog itself. I think it's a dog, but it's the space around it. So I'm defining the dog by the light space around it, just so I can see. And I see how, that shape is working on the facade of the building. So I'm just going to sort of try to pick up on some of these key elements, and I really wanted to get this at least a chunk of this large girl's head into this picture. So I'm actually going to eliminate a bunch of the mural that's in between the dog and the girl, and I'm going to compress the space. So again, we are not replicating the world. We're picking up on the elements that we want to use. We're taking liberties with the world in order to use what we are most attracted to, what we feel will best work for our purpose, for our painting. Because ultimately, this will never be compared to that. First of all, in this case, these walls are going to be demolished, unfortunately, in the next week. But also, the painting will be seen unto itself. And it has to work as a painting and nothing else. So any editorializing that we do as artists, any decision making is all part of our creative process. It's not something that anybody can tell you, oh, these are the rules, you got to stick to what you see. You have to, create only what's in front of you. So, I'm gonna pay a little bit more attention So you notice as I'm working, I am finding a consistency with the paint that I'm using to outline that allows me to not use too much paint, because these lines are going to be covered, but that will give me enough of a clear definition of shapes that when I go to fill them in, most of the work is done already. So again, you know, what's great about copying other artists' work, which is what I'm doing now, copying a little piece of Lady Kay's painting, is it gives me a better feel for her process and her imagination and how she sees the world. It's funny because it's one of the great teaching tools that has been used since probably all through time, but certainly since in all academic painting. That the idea of copying the artists whose work you really admire is a very well used device for teaching art. It's the best way to learn about the decisions that artists make. And just by looking at it, you can get a certain feeling, but by copying it, you can learn a lot more. So again, I'm going to use the negative space that she has created with this orange flowing from on top of her letters, and I'm going to use that device. I didn't have room to put all of her letters in there, but I'm taking the liberty just to include a few. I hope she doesn't mind my editorializing her work. And I'm just going to sort of dissolve the letters into this girl's face, I guess. We'll see how it all fits together. And I'm going to darken the space in between the letters so that they're clear and easy to look at. I might modify that later, but as you notice, I'm basically not doing any blending. I'm just using flat colors, and it's part of this, you know, what I call the blocking out phase of the painting. So along the top is kind of a little bit lighter than what's below it. So I might get a little bit more into detail. You know, for you detail lovers, which a lot of artists are, you just have to be patient, because you are creating the stage for the point when you can, you know, get out the 000 brushes and put in all the little details that you want. You just have to have patience. Because if you jump in too soon, you can make the most beautiful manhole cover ever created. But unless it's in the right location and it's the right size in relation to the rest of your picture, it's not going to work for you. So you want to give this systematic approach a chance, because it will help you to get to the point where you've blocked everything in, you can step back, make adjustments to key relationships, and then feel a great deal of confidence when you get to the detail part of the story. And again, it's all, you know, very forgiving. You can make your changes. If I want it, let's say I wanted a pure white crosswalk, I can take a scraper, I can scrape paint off so the white I put across this crosswalk will not blend with the paint that's below it. If we want to add white or a light color over a dark color. This is one of my secrets I carry. This is actually an etching scraper, but a dull knife. Any kind of, try different tools that you can use to remove paint in small areas so that you can keep your colors clean. So I see now that the front of this building, the light is hitting it, whereas it's the same color, but this is in shadow, this is in light. When something's in shadow, it's a little cooler tone. When it's in the light, it's a little warmer. Maybe I want to put in my window in this building first, just so I can put the bricks around it. I'll start with that. And again, you know, if you get into the scraper as a tool, that can help you. So I don't have to work around these lines. I can work with them. I can, you know, easily lay in my light areas against my dark without getting muddy and distorted. So there's a lot of control, there's a lot of calculation, and there's a lot of patience that's involved with painting. It's calculating where things are going to be in relation to each other, finding a balance of lights and darks, cool and warm tones, not jumping to detail. And it turns out that if your shapes are beautiful and your colors are beautiful, often you don't need so much detail. You know, people tend to bury a bad drawing or an ill-conceived composition in detail, in excess detail, excess color, excess flash and pizzazz. But you know, if you're conscious about the steps that you're using to create these paintings, and you do it systematically like this, you don't have to use those crutches. You can create beautiful paintings, and you'll be surprised, you know, how it will begin to flow. So it's like a jigsaw puzzle at this point. It's colors that define shapes that work together to make a pattern, you know, and then you don't want it too busy, but you don't want it too simple. And these are the aesthetic decisions. These are the artistic decisions that we all, us artists, are always making. How much detail? How refined? How small a brush do I want to use? Hello.
Hello.
Yeah, I'm painting the neighborhood.
Wow,
And doing an episode of Art and About
that's awesome.
for BronxNet. Thanks.
That's coming out really nice.
Thanks. But you're all Bronx people?
Born and raised.
Okay. So how long has this Dignity University been here?
Dignity Universal, we started 1.5 years ago. And it was 3 of us, myself, Michelle, and Rosemary, got together. And we really wanted to give back to the Bronx. We had a loyalty to the Bronx. You know, growing up as a kid, we saw a lot of things happen, you know, with drugs and domestic violence.
Sure.
But at the same time, there's like a real beauty to the Bronx. And I feel like, you know, for us, there was so much that we got from growing up here that we had this need to really give back. So we started Dignity about 1.5 years ago. And really the center is designed to connect people to their life purpose. We believe that everybody has a life purpose, and there's something that's unique about every one of us. So for example, for you, Danny, there's something that's unique about you, you know, based on your past and your experiences. And
what we see in front of us.
I think we see it, we're looking at it firsthand right now, Danny. And it's what you get to contribute and bring forth. So just like you're contributing in your way, Oscar and all these amazing kids and ourselves as adults, we get to contribute in our way and really, you know, transform the conversation about the Bronx and get people to really value, you know, what we have over here.
I'm very fortunate myself, you know, that somehow early in my life I tuned into art, and it was something that really, you know, got me excited. And, you know, I consider myself really fortunate to have been able to do that, and still, you know, at age 58, sticking to my program and having, and it's not a stuck program, it's fresh, you know, coming out here today, you know, having the support of BronxNet, you know, having my friends, you know, show me, enlighten me as to what the whole graffiti thing is. But Lady K today, she called me, she said I was a hip hop dude. So that you know, that means a lot to me, you know, and I really appreciate it. So how many interns are you working with here?
We have about 60 interns from about 6 different providers: Children's Aid Society, Aspira, Catholic Charities, just to name a few. And, you know, they're just really great kids. Each of them with their own uniqueness, their own dreams. You know, we're going to do a TV show with BronxNet. We're really excited about that. You know, getting our kids to.
So it's going to be an ongoing program?
An ongoing thing, and, you know, really get all of us to
fabulous.
Really have that freedom of self-expression and be able to exercise our voice.
Speaking into like everyone having their uniqueness, I would love for her to show you what she drew today.
Wow, today?
Yes. We
Cool.
have an artist.
Cool.
She drew a character for each one of the founders. So this is JD, and you see how his mouth is open because he's like always hi and talking. And then this is me, peace and love, floating, and this is Rosemary just transcending and flying.
Wow.
And I think she did a great job in capturing
Congratulations. So keep up the good work.
Danny, do you mind are you open to a process that we could do with you that I do with our kids?
Okay.
All right,
Maybe.
so I'm going to ask you to close your eyes.
Okay.
Take a deep breath in. Let it go with a sigh. Take another deep breath in. What do you want to be remembered for when this is all over?
How do I want to? I want to be remembered as someone who brought the tradition of painting to this 21st century, you know, new world that we live in. To carry a tradition, but celebrating the present. Okay, all right, so thank you. And thank you, BronxNet, and thank you everyone for tuning in to another episode of Art and About with Danny Haubin on BronxNet. And stay tuned for the next episode, which is guaranteed to be exciting.
Bye.